stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker of Elkins Consulting. We share stories for many reasons, to persuade, to entertain, to connect. What we sometimes forget is the impact of the stories we tell ourselves. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, how you share them makes a difference in how you remember them and in how you're perceived by the people you're interacting with. When you figure out which stories to share, difficult bosses and coworkers, successes, failures, the next step is to develop how you share them. Have you figured out your patterns, your roles in those successes, the discomfort and your challenges? In this series, you'll hear stories that will resonate with you. You'll nod your head in understanding, and then we'll dig into the lessons from each of those. How many times have you been sharing a story only to be interrupted by a person eager to share his own? When I'm working with clients on communication skills, I remind them to listen for understanding, not to respond. But during this podcast, I'm asking you to listen and consider your own related stories, to listen and consider which stories in your life might have impacted you in a similar way. I'm sitting here today in my office and having this great opportunity to visit with somebody named Eddie Wilders. And we met in the comments section of a LinkedIn post on career advice. And my comment was that I got lots of career advice and none of it applied to me. And Eddie said that he really didn't get any career advice. And what would you say to your kids if you didn't get any career advice? How do you give career advice to your children? And I just realized this would be a great podcast episode. His children are very young and my children are not so young. And so I think it'll be a good perspective from both sides. So anyway, Eddie, I always start these podcasts by asking my guests to share something about themselves that most people don't know. Do you have something in mind for that?
Okay. I definitely do. And hello, and thank you for having me. So my family and my closest friends know this, but you wouldn't. And a lot of people who see me in shoes do not know it. But the source of all of my power, as I like to say, is through my left foot. My pinky toe sits on my ring toe. And
Okay.
when I step in the sand, you can only see 9. You'll only see 9 toes in the sand, not 10. So that's an interesting thing. And the funny thing is, one of my brother's best friends has the exact same toe as I do. So it's not as uncommon as I thought it was. But it's definitely the source of all of my power.
The source of your power. Well, that's good.
Yep.
You're like Samson, but with a toe instead of hair.
Exactly.
I like that. That's really funny. And you're right. That is not something that would be on your LinkedIn profile. So
Exactly.
I appreciate that. That's so funny. Did you, were you self-conscious about it when you were a kid?
No, not at all. It was just something that, because within my family, my mom has it on one foot and my grandmother has it on both feet. So I know it's genetic and I know it's inherited. But for me, where it lies, and as I got older, friends of mine were like, "Don't touch me. I'm going to get it. My toe is going to be deformed." Like, it's not going to do that. Don't worry about it. Everything is going to be fine. You're not going to get the evil toe. You'll be fine.
No, the next answer would be, you'd be lucky to have this toe. What's wrong with you? You have no idea what power it brings.
It does. Growing up, it did give me a bit of an issue wearing certain shoes because the tighter the narrower the shoes, I couldn't. It was very uncomfortable because it would rub. But
yeah,
other than that, never. I was always okay when I wore flip flops or bare feet. It doesn't matter to me. Like, hey, you want to look at my toe? Look at my toe. It's a beautiful toe, so I'm okay.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I love that. And it's funny. It's not something I would have thought of. And the reason I always ask my guests to share something like that, something unique about them, is that I like to have some context for the people that we're talking to. So our listeners get a better feel for who you are and what you think is important. And when you have a sense of humor or you're sharing something that's that you think is unique, but other people actually really resonate with, I always find that connects us to our audience more deeply. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for allowing me to tell you something that some people might find gross.
No, what's funny about that is that I always talk about your foundation is your feet and your shoes. And
There you
so
go.
whenever I'm giving presentations and workshops on stepping out of your comfort zone or public speaking or any kind of coaching around that, I always tell people, figure out what shoes you're going to wear first. You can figure out the rest of the outfit based on the shoes, but pick the shoes that make you feel confident and supported and strong. And if it's important to feel beautiful, then wear shoes that make you feel beautiful, but make sure you can walk in them and that they're comfortable. And it's just something that I start with. And it's interesting. My friends who have known me for a lot longer, like through high school and parts of college, laugh every time they hear that because I never wore shoes in high school and college.
Okay.
Even in Colorado, my shoes would come off the moment the snow was off the ground, and I wouldn't put them on again until there was snow on the ground.
Really? That's
So,
I couldn't do that in New York. Growing up in Brooklyn, I had to wear, walking up and down. It's a completely different world in the city than it is anywhere else, and I could not do that. But I completely agree that it is the shoes that all of my outfits start with what shoes am I going to wear that day, and that's the truth.
well, there you
That
go.
is the
That's
truth.
our
What
first
color? What? Yeah, what color belt I'm going to wear because it has to match the shoes. What color socks because it has to match the tie. Yeah.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, because that's the first career advice we give, right, to our kids is
Yeah.
make sure that you are wearing what's appropriate for the audience that you're going to be seeing.
Exactly. I wish I could tell my daughter that now. My daughter's 5 and she doesn't believe in that. She just wants to wear pajamas all the time.
Oh, yes. Well,
So,
and actually, that's kind of a good place to start because when you ask me what I did to support my kids or what supported me in my career choices, one of the things my parents were really intent about was making sure that I had appropriate behavior and appropriate image for wherever I was. So that didn't mean don't show your personality, but it did mean that all through college, if I wasn't wearing shoes, I wasn't wearing shoes. But when it came to an interview, or if I was dropping off an application for a job, of course I was wearing shoes. I was in an outfit that made sense for the job that I wanted.
right.
And that was something, as far as I'm concerned, was the first step in career advice.
Yes. 100%. A good thing that my parents had always said to me was make sure that you're dressed for what you want to do. And I mean, growing up in the 80s, every guy wore a suit to work. I thought that's just what you did. And every female wore, a skirt and high heels. And I just thought that's what you did. Everybody that was in my family that had full-time jobs, corporate jobs or whatnot, that's what they wore to work. And that's what I saw every day. As you get older and times have changed, I don't necessarily have to wear a suit to work, but I definitely wear a tie. My previous employer didn't want us to wear ties. Everything was extremely casual. So there's something to be said for that when it comes to, my daughter and her not wanting to wear clothes. She, she'll wear a dress to school. She'll wear a dress to parties. But if she had her say, she would wear a bathing suit all day long. And while it's great for when we're in Florida and at my parents' house, or it's the summer, that's one thing. But when it's 20 degrees out, she wants to go outside in a bathing suit and Uggs. Yeah, that doesn't work.
One of the things that I talked to my boys about, because we had some friends that were teenage girls when my boys were little, they'd come and spend a lot of time at our house. I had a neighbor who I think she was 11 when we moved in, and I got to meet her. She might have been a little younger. Anyway, we would talk about not wearing pajamas to school, not wearing slippers to school, because it didn't feel like we were taking each other or taking ourselves seriously enough for learning. And it was important to me that my kids understood that when you wear pajamas to school, for one thing, it's setting an image in your head about whether you care about where you are and that difference between being at home and being at school and being in that mindset. But it also demonstrates to your teachers whether you're being respectful.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And the good thing about my daughter's pajamas right now is that I don't want to make excuses, but they are just regular. They just look like regular t-shirts. So
t-shirts and leggings.
So I can get, right now that she's 5, I can still get away with it. We talk every day about what she should be wearing, what she should look like. I mean, she's in the same mode of, oh, I don't care if I'm dirty. I don't care if my hair is brushed. I don't want to put this in. I don't want to put a bow in my hair. I don't want to pull it back. And to make her up into something that doesn't look like a complete mess, she'll allow us to do. You get into, there's always the possibility that something's a little too tight. It doesn't, it's constrictive. I have to cut out tags out of all of her clothing. Does she have some sensory issues? Growing up, I cut out every tag out of every shirt. And to this day, I will only buy t-shirts that are tagless. It's just the way, it's just the way that it is. So for her, being outside of the home, representing herself, and I mean, she's 5, I look around at all these other kids and mismatched clothes and what boys are wearing soccer shorts and sneakers, and it's 25 degrees and snow. At this point, she's 5. I can almost chalk it up to, well, all the other kids are doing it. That's not an excuse, but as long as she's wearing pants, she's wearing a jacket, she's wearing a hat, she's wearing gloves, I can move on past those things. I don't want to talk about what she eats because you're going to get me in trouble. So I don't want to deal with that. But I also feel like she's eventually going to grow out of it. I'm hoping, but we talk every day about it. It's something that we talk about her pajamas. We talk about how like she can't look, like her hair is, we have to brush her hair, and it needs to be neat, and it needs to be clean, and it needs to be presentable. And, people are going to look at it and people are going to say, what are you doing? And people are going to talk anyway, right. I don't care. You want to look at me and you want to say, hey, you look like a mess. That's fine. But I'm also comfortable in what I'm doing. And there are times that I'm dressed in a suit, and there are times I'm dressed, to go to bed. And it has to do with how I'm feeling that day and what I'm doing that day. I'm just running to Target. Yeah, I'm throwing on sweatpants and sneakers. I'm not putting on a suit, right. But if I'm going to work, I'm going to look presentable. And even at my old job, where flip-flops were allowed and shorts were allowed, I always had on at least a polo shirt, at least khakis.
Do you think that that's partly because you knew that you wouldn't take your job as seriously? I mean, I'm a big believer in not taking myself seriously. I mean, I could tell you ridiculous stories like my first full-time job after my internship in Washington, D.C., where I realized I was wearing 2 different colored shoes. So awesome. There's a point where you can't take yourself too seriously, but you do have to take your role seriously to a certain extent. And to me, now I think I will. Now I think I present myself the same way, regardless of what I'm wearing. But I think in my younger years, what I wore definitely played a role in how I saw myself and how I behaved. Do you feel like maybe that's part of why you continue to do what you do, even if it's not required?
Well, I think as I've gotten older, I think my mindset has changed a bit. When I was just starting out and making $23,000 a year, I wasn't afforded the ability to dress the way that I wanted to. I had to dress the way that I needed to on that limited fixed budget.
Right, what you could afford.
What you could afford. And as my career progressed, and you get a little bit more comfortable, and things start adding up. Your rent increases, and your rent becomes a mortgage, and your food bill increases because one becomes two, and then two becomes four, and you're feeding more mouths, but you're able to stretch those dollars a little bit further. So when it comes to presenting yourself and the way that I did, I was fine wearing a t-shirt and shorts to work when I couldn't afford anything else. But as I became a manager, as I became a supervisor, as I became a director and then a VP, I had people under me that were working for me, with me, that I needed to present a better image towards, more of like a role model than a friend. And when it comes to that, then that's when I started to say, hey, you know what? I can't wear a t-shirt. I don't want my team to wear a t-shirt. I need to not wear a t-shirt. I have to show them that I'm doing what I'm doing. Now, you can be uncomfortable, whatever you're doing, and I'm fine with that. If you're going to work hard in a t-shirt and shorts, then you're going to work hard in a t-shirt and shorts. Fine. I'm going to work harder in a button down and a tie. I mean, that's just the way that I am. And when I'm at home, if I'm working at home remotely, I'm not sitting around in my pajamas all day. I'm up, I'm showered, I'm dressed, I'm at my desk, I'm working on my computer. I'm not even sitting on my couch. I'm sitting at my desk.
There's a lot of research out there about that, about remote workers who stay in their jammies. And statistically, you are more productive and more professional if you do have a routine of getting up and getting dressed, and even if you're working from home. So it's interesting because it's hard in terms of judgment. And one of the things that I remind people is that you will get judged. People will make snap judgments about you within seconds of meeting you based on what you're wearing. And based on how you look, and you can adjust those first impressions if you have time and make the effort to adjust those first impressions. And it's not necessarily a good thing. It's not something I agree with, that people should be judged like that. I don't like it. It is what it is. And it's a reality that we have to face. So when I give career advice, I tell the story of when I was a director of sales at a hotel here in Helena, Montana, and a guy came in and delivered a resume and application to the front desk to be front desk staff, this is a nice hotel. This was, we had a ballroom. We had a lot of rehearsal dinners there. It's a nice hotel. And the guy dropped off this resume and application in his gym clothes. And it was after his workout, which, it's bad enough to drop it off in your gym clothes, but to do it after your workout. And I remember just looking at him and thinking, how could you think this was okay? First of all, you're not applying for a janitorial role. You're applying for a job that is an ambassador for me as the sales director. And you're not representing well. And he's not
representing himself well.
Exactly. So I tell that story and remind people it's not that I was judging him for showing up that way. I was suggesting that if he was showing up this way to drop off an application, that he is likely to show up that way for work. That it's so important especially early on in your career, to make that first impression the right impression, and regardless of what judgment is passed. And again, it's really about showing your personality and also showing the respect for the position you're applying for.
Exactly. And I left my previous employer back in January. And so I was looking for a new job, a new position from January through the end of October. And it was a very long 10 months. And every day I would wake up and I would take care of what I needed to do and get myself ready and sit at my desk. And I still wasn't wearing pajamas all day long. And my wife would come home and I would talk to other people. I'm like, oh, what'd you do today? Well, I did this, this, and this. I'm like, you didn't relax? I'm like, no, I didn't relax. I don't have time to relax. What relaxing? It's not relaxing. I got to find a job. on the job. And every week I would work from Monday through Thursday and do whatever I need to do. And then I would take the Friday to relax. I wasn't calling anybody on Friday. Nobody was calling me. I wasn't getting any job offers. I wasn't getting any interviews on a Friday. Nobody wants to work on a Friday. So I took the Friday as, that's the day that I did all of my weekly errands and I did all of my catch up and things of that nature. But I remember, I guess it was like July, and here I am in a polo shirt and shorts, and I'm sitting at the desk, and my wife came home early. She was like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you wearing a polo shirt?" I said, "Because I'm working." Said, "Well, you're not really working." I said, "Yes, finding a job is work." I don't want to hear it. Finding a job was work. And
Oh, it absolutely
that was me. That was me working. And they I would get on a phone call, a phone interview, and there I was with, I will say this, wearing maybe a pair of shorts and a button down and a tie.
Right. Because all they could see was your chested up and your face.
Because all they can see is my face. So as long as I had on a shirt and a tie, I was good to go. But yes, I was wearing shorts, or I was wearing sweatpants, or I was wearing jeans, whatever it was. But when I always feel too that if I'm a little bit more dressed up, even if it's a family party, if I'm beyond just, if I'm in shoes and nice jeans and a button down and a sweater, it feels more like a party to me than if I had just showed up in sneakers and jeans.
Totally.
Just the shoes alone, if I'm wearing shoes compared to a pair of sneakers, no matter what the situation calls for.
It makes it a celebration.
When you get in, exactly. And if I go meet with a client, I know that I have to dress it up just a little bit more. I have to be dressier than what the client is. If I am going to an interview, I have to be a little bit dressier than what the company is, although that's a little lax these days as well. I know
that has definitely shifted.
I know that I can't wear a suit to certain places because they're going to laugh at me and they'll be like, "Nope, you're too old and we don't want you."
Well, yeah. And again, it's really about dressing appropriately for the event. And to me, it's actually more about your intention than it is for anything else. If you are intentional about what you want out of the relationship, what you want out of the meeting, how you want people to perceive you, then I don't care if you're wearing shorts and a t-shirt. You just have to know that there are consequences for how people are going to perceive you in that outfit.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And if I walk into a place that everybody's in mesh shorts and t-shirt, gym clothes, and I'm standing there in a 3-piece suit, that's not the place.
Right. You're not going to get the job.
I'm not getting that job. I'm not getting that job. If I walk in with mesh shorts, with gym clothes, and everybody's in a 3-piece suit, I'm not getting that job. But if I walk into business casual and I'm wearing a tie and a button down, maybe not a suit, but I'm wearing shoes and pants, I have a fighter's chance at that job. Especially these days with a lot of industries are completely different from what they used to be. Like if I was going to be a lawyer, yes, they're all still in suits. If I was going to be a doctor,
not in Montana.
In New York City. Oh, in New York City, it's all like everybody, you're like, "Oh, you're a lawyer, you're on Wall Street, you're in creative."
If you are in Montana, especially in my town, walking around in a suit, people assume you're selling something or you're proselytizing. It's one or the other. People generally don't wear suits here. But let's get back a little bit to the whole career advice thing. You mentioned in the comment section of that post about career advice that you really didn't get any kind of support when it came to parental ideas about what your career should be. Mm-hmm. And your comment was, and I said, well, I got support, but it didn't matter, didn't mean anything to me because I shifted my interests so dramatically and so regularly that the only career advice that stuck that was appropriate for me were things like dress appropriately for the occasion. So what happened? I mean, it seems to me that there's something that happened specifically to you, whether it was in high school or college, where you didn't feel supported either by your parents or by the adults around you when you were trying to get moving on a career.
Well, It's interesting because growing up in Brooklyn, my parents were both employed by New York City. So my dad was with the MTA and my mom was with the Board of Education. And my brother and I are products of the public school system in New York. And I remember being a senior in high school picking colleges, or a junior in high school picking colleges. And my guidance counselor was, I would say, a friend of ours, because she let us hang out in the office during lunch periods and gym periods and time that we didn't want to go to class. She would, let us sit in her office and we would talk. And she was definitely not a guidance counselor in that kind of sense of anything. She just let us cut class. And I don't know any guidance counselor that would allow you to do that. But when you sought out guidance, she was just like, yeah, you do what you want to do. That's what life is all about. I'm like, okay, that's great. And I chose college. I got in, which I wouldn't be able to get in now because the rules are just way astronomical. Like you need a lot higher scores than I got, and it's a lot more competitive now than it was when I was there. And upon graduation, my guidance counselor in college was like, well, you're a communications major. I said, okay, what kind of job can I go for? Well, you can really go for anything. And that's where we left it. And I would ask questions and that was it. So a lot of my guidance came from either friends or people that had graduated from college. My parents didn't go to college. My grandparents didn't go to college. It was not something that generation, not everybody in that generation did. Like all of my friends from high school, minus maybe 3 people that I knew, didn't go to college. So it was that generation those generational things started to change. So I had to look for people that were older than I was, that had graduated from college, that I was friends with, that I had to reach out to and say, hey, how did you, what do you do? What did you do?
That's kind of where
how did you get into it? So,
right. And that's kind of where I was thinking about that, was that your parents couldn't have given you the career advice you needed because they were in such a different place.
Yep. They didn't do that.
Educationally and career wise. Okay.
So they were 18. Yep. They were 18 and got a job. So.
Right. And that was a career and they stayed there for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I just have to go back to this college counselor. Well, you have communication studies. You can really do anything with that. If you're sitting there in the room and you're visualizing it, I mean, I can imagine that you have a pretty strong memory of this experience because it kind of shaped you in some ways. You had that realization that you were kind of on your own on this, and that college degree wasn't going to help you until you figured out what was next. So now I'm curious that you shared that story about the counselor when you finished your college degree in communication studies, and he basically said, oh, well, that's great. You can do almost anything with that, and then left it, and there was no more conversation. So I'm curious, do you have like a vision of that happening? Was it a pivotal time, just sitting there in that office and realizing that he wasn't going to be helpful? And now that you look back at that moment, is there something else that you would have preferred that he say to you? I mean, like, what would be your advice to you at that point?
Well, I'll tell you, in that moment, I was deathly afraid. I was 22 and I knew that I had student loans, and I knew that I was going to have to eventually move out of my parents' house, and I was going to have to do all of these things. And here I was, I went through 4 years of classes and learning all of these different things, that some things I needed, some things I didn't. And to not have any type of full steam ahead plan scared me beyond belief. Now, I will say that my communications degree did allow me the ability to do anything, whether it be PR, publishing, advertising, marketing. It allowed me to do a lot because I will say that what college did teach me was it taught me how to talk to people, and my degree taught me how to talk to people. So I was able to take that with me. What I would have given the advice that would have given me at that time would be, since this degree is very diverse and you can do a lot with it, pinpoint what you're interested in and use that as a starting point to what road you want to go down. Because at that time, I had no idea what I was interested in. I knew that I couldn't go into, say, teaching because I didn't have a teaching degree, but I knew that I could go into advertising. I knew I could go into marketing. And the way that I kind of fell into what I started doing was with the fact that I enjoyed watching television. So to get into advertising was kind of a no-brainer for me at that point because I watched so much TV and it made a lot of sense. And getting into the advertising world in 2000 was a lot easier than it is now. My cousin worked for a firm. She was like, hey, we need an assistant. I said, great, I need a job. 2 weeks later, I was hired. So I graduated and started 2 weeks later. So, but I would tell me back then, you need to focus on, you need to boil this down to 2 or 3 different things that you really like as a starting point. And then from there, keep branching out until you find the thing that you want to do between the hours of 9 to 5 for 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, or 50 weeks a year because you get 2 weeks vacation, 50 weeks a year. That's not going to bore you. That's going to challenge you. That's going to provide for you and eventually your family. And that's going to make you happy.
So do you think that if somebody had given you that advice, do you think you would have followed it? I mean, like, how do you even take action on that kind of advice?
Absolutely not. I was 22.
Right.
You know,
kind of where I'm going with it. Like, I could give advice, ridiculously good advice to somebody who's 22. They're not going to take it.
They're not going to take it. I wouldn't take it.
Way.
I mean, right now I'm 42 and I don't know if I still want to take that advice. But I think it would have been, at least it would have given me a starting point. I didn't even have a starting point from that counselor, and I couldn't even remember his name. And I didn't have a starting point from my high school guidance counselor. I remember her name. I'm not going to say it, but I remember her name. But I didn't have that. I didn't have any starting points. And all of my starting points happened after the fact. When I started my job, then I started thinking, well, can I do this? Can I do this? Should I go back into this? Can I go back to school for this? Everybody tells me, oh, you'd be a great kindergarten teacher. Mm-hmm. Great. You couldn't have told me this when I was 16. You couldn't have told me when I was 18, right, when I was starting college.
I feel like what you really wanted from that guy was something more concrete than career advice.
Yes.
I think what you really wanted from him was either some sort of an assessment that would help you understand what you're really good at, interviewing people that you've worked with or people that taught you to ask them what they thought your strongest talents were. Like, for instance, now I've been doing the StrengthsFinder. I've been using that tool now for a little while, and I've coached more than 200 people using that tool. And every time I use it for a young adult, I think, God, I wish I had this when I was younger. And so I think what you were really asking him for was something more concrete, like apply for a job in this area, see if you like it, and then, reassess and figure out what's related to it that you might enjoy more. It's something really a lot more specific than general career advice.
Yes. And I understand that you can't be, for me personally, that specific career advice might be good, might not be good. And there are people out there who need that hand holding, and there are people that can just fly by the seat of their pants. I'm kind of in the middle. I need some sort of starting point, and then I can go off on tangents, and I'm okay with that. But at that point, as a 22-year-old, you're just starting your life, and you didn't learn anything in college anyway. You didn't learn how to balance a checkbook. You didn't learn how to, you learned how to wash clothes. And I learned by trial and error that you don't wash clothes on hot, you wash them on cold because you know shrink.
And you don't wash something red with something white.
Your white. Yes.
Yeah. I think we all learned that lesson the hard way.
But when it comes to careers, you don't have you're not afforded the time to trial and error. You're basically, You graduate on a Sunday and you got to find a job on Monday. And
Yeah, I kind of disagree with that though a little bit.
fights.
When you say you don't have time for trial and error, I think that's all you have is time for trial and error. And if you're right in the middle where you don't really want to fly by the seat of your pants, but you also don't want somebody to hold your hand and give you a direction specifically, I think what would have helped you at that moment was just like 3 concrete ideas. Apply for a job in this area, or this area. Walk through these job ads and see what, when you read the description, really lights you up. Something just to get you started because you were in that panic mode of, I don't know what to do. But
Yes.
I think what happens is people think, especially older people looking back, that we were going to find something we love and that was going to be our career. I never was delusional about that because I lose interest so quickly. I'm a little impulsive, and once I learn something really well, which I get really excited about something that I'm learning, and I get really, really good at it, and then I get bored. So I see myself as like a 2 to 3 year employee.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
I think that that's unusual. But I also believe that if we go into this career advice giving idea of telling people that they don't have time for trial and error, I think we're doing them a disservice.
I agree with you. And I would never tell somebody that. I'm saying from my own personal vantage point, I didn't have time for trial and error. Remember, my parents were the ones that were like, well, now that you're graduated, you have to find a job. You have to get a job. You don't have the time to sit home and look for a job. You need money. So that's the advice that I was given. It's not career advice, even a little bit. It's the fear of God was put into you that you had to get a job.
So you didn't feel like you had an opportunity for trial and error, but you really did. I mean, because that's what you did. You took the first job and tried it out for a while, and changed jobs and tried it out for a while.
Ended up what happened was I took my first job, and it turned into a second job that I was at for 17 years.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
But I'll say this, I should have left a long time ago, and I should have gotten more experience than what I got.
In those 17 years.
In those 17 years, yes. Mm-hmm. And even though I was an executive and I had my hand in a lot of things, and I was doing a lot of things, managing a lot of people and helping manage an entire agency, I got bummed on learning other things within the industry that I was in that didn't allow me to move forward, basically. Mm-hmm. So all of my experience is siloed into this one area with this one agency that no one else does. So, now with a house and mortgage and kids and a wife and bills, and now I'm not afforded the time that I should have had, 10, 15 years ago, when I should have been looking for that position and that job that made me extremely happy, that brought out a passion or didn't allow me to get bored. So I understand 100%. I 100% agree with you. When I was 22, me personally, I wasn't afforded that time to pick and choose what I wanted to do, which is why this came along. I jumped on it. Oh, look at that. I have a job, and everybody was happy, and that was more or less what needed to happen, was make the parents happy and make money so they didn't have to pay for you. Mm-hmm. So that was where I came from. But if I was telling my 22-year-old self now, I would say, look for everything that you want to look for in a position. Take your time.
Do some trial and error.
Yep, and make sure that it's what you want to do and not just doing it because it's there.
Totally agree. I'm totally on board with that. And I'd also like to add that you have an opportunity now that might surprise you, that being where you are in terms of self-reflection and the opportunities that you're going to be exploring over the next few years, that you are in a place where I think you're underestimating what you learned in that time, despite it being so niched. I can tell you that when I work with certain coaching clients, when they're transforming or transitioning in their careers, one of the things they don't realize is how much of what you learned can be applied outside of that niche. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where you go with this, because I think you're going to surprise yourself in the next 3 years about how much you actually know and how much you learned.
Oh, I 100%, I 150% agree with that. And, you know, I've taken what I've learned, and I know that what I don't know and what I do know, especially within the industry, you know, I don't know a lot within the industry, but what I do know is the X's and O's of the industry. And I know the X's and O's of running a small organization and bringing an organization from 13 people to 80 people and what goes into that.
So depth.
Yes. But I mean, unfortunately, when you talk to a recruiter or you talk to, you know, a hiring manager, they have 45 bullet points of things that you need to meet. And if you only meet 43 of them, you're not getting that job.
Oh, I think you're looking at the wrong jobs then, Eddie.
Oh, I know. And we can talk. Oh, I know. And we can have a whole nother conversation about things that are broken within the hiring world.
And then all that great career advice kind of goes out the window when you're
goes out the window.
Those
exactly.
Organizations. Yep. Totally.
But I know that over the last 10 months, you know, as I tried to find something, I held on to the advice that I would get from people similar to like somebody in your position, a career coach, or, you know, somebody who, if I had been with them long enough, I would consider them a mentor or, you know, something like that. One of the things that I had to do, and it's one of the things that if I was ever in a position to counsel somebody younger, you know, is you got one of the things that the only thing that kept me moving forward was staying positive. And it sounds, you know, it's one of those things that you don't think about as a career advice, but it's one of those things that, you know, if you don't stay positive, you go into a shell and you just shut everything off, you're definitely not finding anything. And
that is life advice. That's not just career advice.
Yeah, I know. So for me, like I hand off a resume to somebody and I'm like, have a great day. And they're like, you were so positive. I'm like, there is no other way to be but positive. Like something has to happen, and good is just going to happen eventually. Like
who wants to be around you when you're not like that?
Nobody. Like nobody's going to want to listen to me complain. You know, nobody's going to want to hear me, you know, complain about X, Y, and Z. No, I'm going to stay positive and I'm going to be happy, and you're going to want to be around me, because at that same time, I don't know who I'm going to meet at that moment. It might be somebody that is my future employer, or it might be somebody who is going to be my future partner in business, and we're going to open up a great shop together, and you never know.
Which leads full circle back to that first part of our discussion, which is be intentional about how you present yourself.
Exactly.
That is the best career advice as far as I'm concerned, because no matter where you are, no matter who you're interacting with, you are an ambassador for yourself.
You're marketing yourself constantly. And if somebody takes a look at what first impression, it's you're people see you. They don't know you. They've never spoken to you. The first impression is what you look like. And are you a mess? Are you put together? Do you look pretentious?
Are you smiling?
Are you smiling? Do you look sad? Do you just look miserable? Do I want to talk to you because you look miserable? No, I don't. You know, like I don't want you to bring me down. I don't have time for that. But if you're smiling, I'm going to want to talk to you. And you know, it's one of those situations when you're single and you're in a bar and you're at the end of the bar drinking by yourself, and you're like, oh, woe is me. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a boyfriend. I'm not going to want to go up to you and talk to you and potentially be that partner. But you're smiling, I'm going to be drawn to you. You're looking, you know, you're put together, I'm going to be drawn to you. It's first impression is through the eyes. And there's a lot to be said through what your eyes tell other people, what story your eyes tell. And the first thing that you're going to look at when you meet somebody are their eyeballs. You look in their eyes and you say hello, shake a hand. You look down at their knees and be like, hey, how are you? No, you look at your eyes. And that's, that, and it goes to the face and the hair and from the neck up and then everything else. So marketing yourself, first impression, the first thing that people see is what you present to them. And
that is great career advice.
Yeah.
Right there. Eddie, thank you for sharing that with me and for sharing your thoughts with our listeners. It has been a great conversation, and it went in different directions than I had anticipated, and I'm really glad for that. So
good.
Thank you. And for our listeners, I will have a blog post associated with this podcast with more details about Eddie. I can put a LinkedIn link there so that you can connect with him on LinkedIn and learn more about his experience in his niche market if you're interested. And thank you. Thank you, Eddie, for taking the time.
I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com.
Now listen to me, honey, while I say, how could you tell me that you're going away?